Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. Go ahead and mentally grab your lab coats because we're diving straight into a really critical, high stakes science lesson today. We're going to look at something so incredibly ubiquitous that we honestly forget it's even there: the unseen, microscopic particles we inhale literally every single day. Look, we all know pollution is bad, right? But today we're putting it under the microscope. We want to see exactly how it dictates the health of our communities, especially through the eyes of vulnerable urban families. We'll break down what it is, what it actually does to our biology, and how socioeconomic divides totally shape the very air we breathe. Let's kick things off with a number that just completely blew my mind. 6.5 million. That is the number of global deaths air pollution is responsible for every single year. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. Over 6 million. This isn't just some abstract environmental issue. It is a massive, ongoing public health crisis happening right under our noses. Well, actually, quite literally inside our noses. It's a silent epidemic touching pretty much every corner of the globe. So here's our game plan for today's Explainer. First, we'll cover the global threat. Then we'll break down the actual chemistry of pollution. Third, we'll take a deep breath and look at respiratory impacts before moving beyond the lungs to heart disease in part 4. And finally, we'll wrap up with the inequality of exposure. All right, jumping right into section 1, a major global threat. Now, while bad air is a universal issue, the burden is definitely not shared equally. From the dense, suffocating smog over Delhi to the hazy inversion layers trapped in Los Angeles, urban families are squarely on the front lines. Get this, 9 out of 10 people in urban areas worldwide are affected by air pollution. If you live in a city, this toxic reality is likely just a normal part of your daily routine, settling right over your neighborhood day in and day out. So where is all this actually coming from? Well, it's a pretty hazardous mix. On one hand, you have human-made sources just pumping emissions into the sky. Think of vehicles idling in gridlock, massive manufacturing plants, or industrial power grids. But then that combines with natural sources that we can't really control, like smoke from raging wildfires or ash from volcanoes. Honestly, it's kind of like a giant invisible soup trapped right over our cities, with exhaust fumes and wildfire dust as the main ingredients. When they merge, they create a highly toxic atmospheric cocktail. Okay, let's switch gears to section 2, the chemistry of pollution. Putting my science teacher hat back on for a second, let's walk through this toxic ingredients list. Because our air, it isn't just oxygen and nitrogen anymore. We're inhaling noxious gases, like ground-level ozone, which you probably just know as smog, along with carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur oxides. We've also got volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, off-gassing from things like paints and gasoline. But you really need to pay attention to that last one: polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAH. These come directly from combustion. And the truly terrifying part, 15 types of these PAHs are officially listed as known carcinogens. Yikes. Now, when we talk about particulate matter, specifically PM 2.5, the scale of it is almost impossible to wrap your head around. But try this analogy. Pluck a single hair from your head and look at it. Just one strand. A PM 2.5 particle is 30 times thinner than that hair. 30 times. Because these fine solids and liquids, things like sulfates, carbon, and dusts, are so microscopic, our body's natural filters in our nose and throat just can't catch them. We inhale them deeply. And the data is crystal clear here. These specific, tiny particles account for the vast majority of severe health effects, directly linking fine dust to severe cardiopulmonary diseases. Which brings us to section 3, deep breath, respiratory impacts. When you take a breath, that microscopic particulate matter penetrates super deeply into human lung tissue. And we aren't just talking about a temporary cough here. Gases like carbon monoxide literally starve your blood of oxygen by binding to your hemoglobin, while sulfur oxides severely inflame the delicate lining of your airways. This constant daily inhalation is directly implicated in developing and worsening some really severe respiratory diseases. We're talking chronic, life-altering conditions: emphysema, asthma, and COPD. The actual architecture of the lung is basically put under siege. And unfortunately, that cellular damage doesn't just stay in your lungs as localized inflammation. Prolonged exposure to PM 2.5 and nitrogen dioxide is actually linked to an increased risk of several specific cancers. Now, lung cancer makes sense, right? You'd expect that. But because these microscopic particles trigger severe systemic inflammation throughout your entire body, the damage is also tied to increased risks for breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and even prostate cancer. Moving into section 4, beyond lungs, heart disease. This naturally brings up a really crucial question. Once these particles settle in our respiratory system, is the rest of our body safe?
The short answer? No, absolutely not. Let's trace the biological pipeline connecting the air we breathe straight to our cardiovascular system. Okay, step 1. That fine particulate matter is deeply inhaled, completely bypassing our natural defenses. Step 2. Those tiny particles cross right over into the bloodstream where they actively impair blood vessel function and actually lower your good HDL cholesterol. And finally, step 3, because the blood vessels are now damaged, weakened, and functioning poorly, the risk of a severe hemorrhagic stroke goes way up. It's a direct, undeniable biological chain reaction from a tailpipe on your street right up to the blood vessels in your brain. All right, section 5, the inequality of exposure. Let's shift gears from biology to sociology for a minute, because this invisible threat, it absolutely does not treat all demographics equally.
Look at the data on socioeconomic disparities. Over time, there have been massive global efforts to reduce emissions, right? But the benefits of those efforts are not shared equally at all. Higher income groups are experiencing much larger declines in air pollution emissions in their areas. Put simply, wealthier areas are getting cleaner air, and they're getting it faster. Meanwhile, lower-income neighborhoods, which are often situated right next to highways or industrial zones due to historical urban planning decisions, generally experience much smaller declines. They're still heavily burdened by smog. Suggesting targeted urban development changes like rerouting heavy transit or planting dense green buffers around these neighborhoods is an absolutely crucial data-driven step to fix this disparity. And this data has profound human consequences, especially for vulnerable urban families. Children are inherently more susceptible to these pollutants. Why? Because their bodies are still developing, and their airways are physically smaller. It's totally heartbreaking when you think about a kid just trying to, be a kid. Children living in high ozone areas who play outdoor sports, where they're running around, breathing heavily, pulling that toxic air deep into their small lungs, are significantly more likely to develop asthma. The simple act of playing outside carries a heavy invisible risk. This is exactly why checking daily local air quality alerts and maybe holding off on rigorous outdoor sports on high ozone days is such a necessary, actionable habit for families today. Well, that brings us to the end of our lesson today. We've seen how a tiny particle, 30 times thinner than a human hair, can systematically inflame your body and even trigger a stroke. And we've seen how socioeconomic divides largely dictate who gets to breathe the easiest. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on. Are invisible inequalities shaping the air in your own neighborhood? Take a look around your community. Maybe consider joining some local grassroots initiatives advocating for safer air policies. And ask yourself what unseen forces might be at play the next time you take a deep breath. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.